So Terence Crawford stops Sean Porter in a very good fight, in my opinion. He stops Sean Porter in the 10th round, retaining his WBO belt. And this fight was very entertaining, back and forth action at times. And Crawford came out on top. He was the better man, and he becomes the first fighter to stop Sean Porter. So a good accomplishment and a good performance from Crawford. In terms of the stoppage, very controversial, and I'm going to be speaking about that later on in this video, so stay tuned for that. I was scoring the fight, and my scorecard, I had Porter winning the first couple of rounds. I had Porter winning the first 3 rounds, actually, and every round after that, I scored to Bud Crawford. But there were some swing rounds in there. Rounds 1 and 2 were quite close, but I did think Porter was just a little bit, just landing a few more shots, like landing a couple more shots in the rounds, especially with his jab. So I did think that Porter won those first couple of rounds, mainly because of his jab. He was doing a good job with that. And the 8th round was quite close as well. I believe Crawford started better in that round, and then Porter came on later on in the round, landed some good shots. But yeah, those rounds 1, 2, and 8, and maybe one of the other rounds were swing rounds. And like I said, I gave the first 3 rounds to Porter, and rounds 4 to round 9 to Crawford, and obviously round 10 was the stoppage. So, but I can understand if other people had different scorecards. I mean, some people may have given 4 rounds to Porter. I mean, it was quite a close fight going into the 10th. I did think that Crawford was ahead. But it was a close fight going into the stoppage. I can see if some people may have had Porter winning 4 rounds and then Bud winning 5, or they may have had it 6-3 in Bud's favor. I mean, I can see a scorecard like that, or 5-4 in Crawford's favor. So either way you had it, I do think that Crawford was ahead going into the 10th, but it was a relatively close fight. And on top of that as well, there were some swing rounds as well, rounds where both fighters were going back and forth, landing really good shots. Yeah, just an all-round good fight, and both fighters showed that they're top level fighters, really. So Sean Porter was doing a good job of cutting off the ring throughout the fight, but especially in the first 3 rounds. He was cutting off the ring well. Rather than following Crawford, he was cutting him off and slowly closing that distance. And there were times where he got Crawford on the ropes, and when he did get Crawford on the ropes, he was letting his hands go. Yeah, Sean Porter's always had fast feet. And he displayed that in this fight as well. Fast feet to cut off the ring, which he was doing pretty well throughout the fight. Also as well, as Porter was cutting off the ring, he was utilizing a very good jab as well as he was stepping forward. So utilizing a good jab, and that jab was landing quite a lot in the early round as well. So utilizing that jab, doubling up on the jab as well, changing his rhythm as he's going on the front foot as well, changing his rhythm, changing head slots, moving his head, just making himself a difficult target for Crawford to time, because Crawford was trying to time him coming in, especially with his straight right hand, because Crawford started off orthodox, so he was trying to time him coming in with different power shots. But because of Porter's unpredictability with his entry point, and because of Porter's just really awkward and unpredictable rhythm, and the fact that he moves his head a lot as well, and he's athletic, he's got fast feet, Crawford was having a difficult time really finding his range and finding his rhythm and finding his timing. And so a lot of Crawford's power shots were missing in the first 3 rounds, and Porter was landing with the jab a lot, and he was just overall throwing more punches than Crawford, and being the ring general. That's the impression I got in the early rounds, that Porter was being the ring general, and so that's why I scored the first 3 rounds to him. Also as well, Porter was getting the better of the exchanges. There was an exchange they had in round 2 where they both threw shots, both of them landed, but Porter was landing with the better shots in the exchanges in the early rounds as well. So yeah, like a lot of those rounds were like, Porter wasn't like comfortably beating him in the early rounds. The rounds were close, but I just thought Porter was just doing the slightly better work in my view. But to be honest, it's not really too much of a surprise. Like, it's not a surprise at all that Porter was, in my opinion, slightly ahead in the early rounds, because as most of you guys know, Terence Crawford is a slow starter. He's been that way in many of his fights against Gamboa, against even the Benavides fight. He didn't have the best start, and against Hank Lundy, many fights in Crawford's career where he's been a slow starter, and he wasn't too much of a slow starter in this fight, but still you could say relatively slow of a starter. So Crawford is one of the fighters where it takes him time to find his rhythm, to find his range, to find his timing, and to just enter that flow state where he's really just going through the gears and he's showing all the tools he has in his toolbox. So yeah, in the early rounds, Crawford just couldn't really find his time, and that's also a credit to Sean Porter as well, like I've stated. But yeah, like Crawford is known to be a slow starter, but around round 3, round 4-ish, around that point, that's when Crawford started to get in his groove. That's when Crawford started to get in his groove. He started to get in his rhythm. And one thing he would do, and that's around the point where he changed stance. He changed from orthodox to southpaw, which he does in many fights. In a lot of his fights. He starts off orthodox and then changes to southpaw. Did that against Kell Brook. Did that against Kaviauskas, I believe, as well. And that's another fight where he had a slow start as well. But yeah, he did that against Kell Brook, Kaviauskas, against Gamboa. Started off orthodox and then changed to southpaw. And in this fight, he did it again. He changed to southpaw, and then when he changed to southpaw, that's when he started throwing a lot of left uppercuts to the body. When Porter would come in, Crawford would throw the left uppercut to the body, and he would land in that. And he was putting a lot of power into that shot as well. A lot of power into that shot, and that shot was landing several times. He landed that shot several times, left uppercut to the body, straight left hands to the body, and he was doing a good job of turning Sean Porter as well throughout the fight. So he's making just certain adjustments in there from round 3-ish onwards, like turning Sean Porter when Sean Porter would come in, trying to apply pressure and close down the distance, obviously being the shorter fighter with the shorter arms. That's what Porter was trying to do a lot of the time. And so what Crawford would do is turn him, he would pivot around Porter. Yeah, like he would pivot around Porter and spin off and do a check hook. Yeah, he was utilizing the check hook for using from the southpaw stance at many times during this fight. So those are just some of the things that Terence Crawford was doing really well. He was going to the body with the straight left hand and left uppercut to the body as well, landing it several times and putting a lot of power into the shot as well. That was a really effective body shot for him throughout the fight. And on top of that as well, he was landing the check hook as well when Porter would come in and try and close the distance. So that's a move that Floyd Mayweather does. And Floyd Mayweather did that move against Ricky Hatton several times. And Ricky Hatton also a guy that's a pressure fighter trying to close the distance. So that check hook is a good move to use, is a good move to utilize when you're fighting against a shorter pressure fighter who's trying to close the distance, that check hook. And that was a key weapon for him in this fight as well. That was a key weapon for Crawford. He landed that shot a few times in this fight. And on top of that as well, he was stepping back and throwing, like I said, good body shots and landing with body shots really well as Sean Porter was trying to close the distance. So he was starting to find his range and starting to find his timing, especially with those body shots. And in the mid rounds as well, that's when he started throwing a lot of combination. Round 6 was a brilliant round for Terence Crawford. He started off that round throwing wicked combinations. Like the guy was just going to head to body, switching it, great punch variety, great accuracy, great power, speed. Yeah, just brilliant combination punching in that first half a minute of round 6. Absolutely brilliant to watch. And one thing he was doing as well, really well, Crawford, was the defensive and offensive transitions. So throughout the fight, but especially in round 6, Crawford would throw a combination and then he'd know that Porter would try and counter and then he would pull back and then continue with the combination. So he'd throw 4 or 5 punches, pull back, continue throwing, do another defensive maneuver, continue throwing, just brilliant hitting and not getting hit. But at the same time, he's letting his hands go as well while doing that, while hitting and not getting hit. So brilliant from Crawford. And that just goes to describe what Crawford does once he finds his rhythm. Because like I said, he's a slow starter, But once he gets into his rhythm, into his timing, and he's got his opponent figured out, which he was starting to do, he was starting to break Porter down, starting to figure Porter out, then from that point, it's usually a wrap. Like, it's usually a wrap for his opponents. It's usually the beginning to the end. Like, yeah, it usually gets really uncomfortable for his opponents. And to me, this fight just really describes what happens in boxing when a special fighter fights a very good fighter. Because there's a difference between a special fighter and a very good fighter. Sean Porter is a very good fighter, beating Danny Garcia, Devin Alexander, Adrian Broner. He's got some good wins on his resume. He's fought all the top welterweights. So he's a very good fighter, but Crawford is special, man. Like, Terence Crawford is a special fighter. And he's shown it once again today, because one thing special fighters can do is that they have that ability to just go through the gears. And that's what Crawford was doing so well in this fight. He just went through the gears, especially in those middle rounds, 6, 7, 8, 9. He just went through the gears. Brilliant punch picking, punch variety, combination, hand speed, his accuracy, just all around brilliant. And I know that, like I was saying, like, special fighters can make adjustments. They can make adjustments against very good fighters. And Crawford did that as well in this fight, going from orthodox to southpaw, doing the move where he was stepping back and throwing a good left, good straight left to the body and good uppercuts to the body, spinning off as well and pivoting around Sean Porter when Sean Porter would try and come in, throwing the check hook as well. Yeah, just all around brilliant adjustments from Crawford. And he just separated himself from the likes of Sean Porter in this fight, because a lot of people were saying this is a big test for Crawford. This is a big test. He hasn't fought anyone of the level of Porter, which is true, but he definitely passed that test, if you want to call it that. He definitely passed that test. One thing also as well about Terence Crawford is that, in my opinion, yeah, Terence Crawford is probably the most, if not one of the most, underrated punchers in boxing. This guy's got very good punching power, but no one really ever credits him for his power. No one really talks about his power. People just act like this guy's got average power, which is far from the truth. This guy, in my opinion, is actually quite a big puncher. Yeah, I'd actually go that far. Terence Crawford is a big puncher. Like, he has stopped every single welterweight he's fought. Everyone he's fought in the division, he's stopped. Amir Khan, Kell Brook, Kaviauskas, Jeff Horn, and Benavides, and now Sean Porter. Like, he's stopped everyone that he's fought in the division. That's brilliant. First guy to stop Sean Porter, dropping him twice in one fight. First time anyone's dropped Porter twice in a fight. And Porter hasn't got a bad chin. He's not chinny. I mean, he has got a decent chin. So the fact that Crawford's stopping all these welterweights just shows, again, I do strongly believe that Crawford is a big puncher. At 140, at 140 pounds, he was stopping a lot of guys. Stopped Felix Diaz, stopped Molina, stopped Ndongo with body shots, stopped a few other guys. I think the only guy he didn't stop at 140 was Postal, and Postal's a very good fighter. There might have been one or two other fighters he didn't stop, but Postal's one of the, from what I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Postal's the only guy he didn't stop at 140. So Terence Crawford is a big puncher. He's on a big knockout streak right now. He stopped every single welterweight he's fought, but because the guy is very skilled, people don't really appreciate his power. People don't really give him credit for his power. But I believe that's one of the reasons why people don't really talk about his power, because he's got tremendous skills as well. Whereas if he wasn't as skilled, maybe more people would mention his power, because yeah, the guy's a very underrated puncher. And I would say he's a big puncher. I might even say that he's a bigger puncher than Errol Spence. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but in terms of punching power, he might be a bigger puncher than Spence. Yeah, he might be. He actually might be a bigger puncher than Spence, possibly. Even though Spence is bigger and he's more of a natural welterweight, you could argue he's a bigger puncher than Spence. But speaking of Errol Spence, speaking of the truth, speaking of him, he was actually at the fight, and that's the fight everyone wants to see. Everyone wants to see Errol Spence and Terence Crawford get in the ring and scrap. Everyone wants to see that. So this whole hold up and this whole talk that Spence is giving of, wrong side of Crawford being on the wrong side of the street. That's all nonsense. And we know that's nonsense because Sean Porter, who's also with PBC, who's also with Al Heyman, has just fought Terence Crawford. So if Sean Porter can fight him, so can Errol Spence. So that whole wrong side of the street talk from Spence is all nonsense. And on top of that, as boxing fans, we don't want to hear that. We want to see the best fight the best. And in whatever order you want to have it, Errol Spence and Terence Crawford are number 1 and number 2 in whatever order. So they need to get it on. Like, they need to get it on. Like, and it would have been really good if Crawford called him out, but he didn't. And also, it also would have been brilliant if Spence went into the ring and called him out. But I'm thinking, does Spence really want that smoke? Does Spence really want that smoke? Because like, his energy wasn't the same when Sean Porter beat Danny Garcia. His energy was totally different then. When Sean Porter beat Danny Garcia, he was quick to go in the ring there. He was quick to go in the ring and call Sean Porter out and say he wants to fight him and say that he's going to beat him. Like, he was quick to do it there, but he doesn't have that same energy when it comes to Crawford. When it comes to Crawford, he's quick to leave the arena instead. So, like, after Crawford got the stoppage, like, Spence just left the place. So, yeah, totally different energy when it comes to Crawford. So, just showed me Spence doesn't really want that fight. He really doesn't want that fight. And it's really a shame because that's one of the biggest fights to be made in boxing, really. Definitely. But in terms of the actual stoppage now and the controversy surrounding that, in my opinion, I think it was a bad stoppage. I don't understand why Kenny Porter stopped the fight, because it was a fight that, although I do think that Crawford was winning, it was quite close. Like, you could argue that Crawford was only winning by a round. You could make that argument. Me personally, I had him up by more than that, but you could make the argument that Crawford was only up by a round. And so for Sean Porter's dad to stop the fight, it is quite strange, because it's not like Porter was taking a beating. Yes, Crawford was finding his rhythm, and Crawford was starting to, like, pick up a lot of the middle rounds, and he was starting to land really good shots, the head and body, etc. But he wasn't beating them up in there. Porter didn't have any like bad injuries or anything like that, or have a really bad eye. Like, he wasn't taking a shellacking, Sean Porter. He wasn't taking a shellacking. He wasn't taking a beating. And I know he got dropped twice in that 10th round, but both of those knockdowns, he wasn't on wobbly legs. Like, he did look that he was okay to continue. So I think it was a bad stoppage from the trainer, from Kenny Porter, for him to stop that fight. Because, yeah, like I said, it's not like Porter was taking a beating and he was still in the fight. It's not like he had lost every round. No. Like, he was still in the fight. He wasn't taking a beating or shellacking. And it was a competitive fight throughout. Yes, the last 3-4 rounds before the stoppage, Crawford was taken over. But in terms of the scores, the scorecards, like, it was, although Crawford was ahead, it was competitive. And so, yeah, like, it's very, very, like, I thought that was a terrible stoppage from Kenny Porter. And I think, and he ended up in the post-fight interview, he ended up kind of dissing Sean Porter. He said he pretty much dissed his son's preparation for the fight. He said that his son didn't prepare and his preparation was terrible. So, damn, like, I'm not sure how much longer that relationship is going to be good between Kenny Porter and Sean Porter. Like, that relationship they have now, especially after Kenny Porter's done that, damn, yeah, like, it wouldn't surprise me if they end up, like, I know Sean Porter has announced his retirement, but it wouldn't surprise me if they end up not being on good terms, not being on speaking terms, or something like that after Kenny Porter said that. Because, yeah, like, it's crazy. But yeah, I think that Kenny Porter made the wrong decision there by stopping the fight. And I know some people may say, "Oh, Crawford's a very good finisher. Like, he would have knocked Porter out anyway if he continued." And maybe so, but Porter deserved, like, to get, like, a more conclusive ending, because he was still in the fight. Even though he was behind, he was still in the fight. He was still competitive. And from rounds 1 to 9, like, he didn't take a beating in any of those rounds. Even in the rounds he lost convincingly, I wouldn't say he was taking a shellacking. I wouldn't say he was taking a beating, no. And he had no serious injuries or anything like that to prevent him from continuing the fight. So for those 3 reasons, like, he didn't, like, for his dad to stop it, yeah, poor decision in my view. But yeah, Terence Crawford, absolute bad boy fighter. Bad boy fighter, Terence Crawford. Special fighter. And, like, he did his thing today. I mean, yesterday. He did his thing. Great performance. And we'll see where he goes from here. I'm guessing the Spence fight is not going to happen, but we'll see where he goes from here. In terms of Sean Porter, he announced his retirement, and he's had a very good career. He did a very good career. So credit to him, credit to both fighters, and that's it for this video. Guys, leave your comments in the comment section below on everything that I've said in the video, pretty much. Your thoughts on the fight and everything like that. Leave your comments in the comment section below. And if you want to see more content like this, just more boxing content, subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video as well if you enjoyed it. But yeah, until next time.